Jews of European origin became disconnected from their families and roots. As the Holocaust mainly affected Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews, who had been a minority, became a much more significant factor in the Jewish world. Those Jews who survived in Central Europe were displaced persons, refugees. An Anglo-American committee of inquiry, established to examine the Palestine issue, surveyed their ambitions and found that over 95% wanted to migrate to Palestine. 249, 250, 251. In the Zionist movement, the moderate pro-British and British citizen, Wiseman, whose son died flying in the RAF, was undermined by Britain's anti-Zionist policies. 252. Leadership of the movement passed to the Jewish Agency in Palestine, now led by the anti-British Socialist Zionist Party, MAPI, led by David Ben-Gurion. 253. Illegal Jewish immigration and insurgency. The British Empire was severely weakened by the war. In the Middle East, the war had made Britain conscious of its dependence on Arab oil. British firms controlled Iraqi oil and Britain ruled Kuwait, Bahrain and the Emirates. Shortly after VE Day, the Labour Party won the general election in Britain. Although Labour Party conferences had for years called for the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, the Labour government now decided to maintain the 1939 White Paper policies. 254. Buchenwald survivors arrive in Haifa to be arrested by the British. 15 July 1945. Illegal migration, Aliyah Bet, became the main form of Jewish entry into Palestine. Across Europe, Bricha Flight, an organization of former partisans and ghetto fighters, smuggled Holocaust survivors from Eastern Europe to Mediterranean ports, where small boats tried to breach the British blockade of Palestine. Meanwhile, Jews from Arab countries began moving into Palestine overland. Despite British efforts to curb immigration during the 14 years of the Aliyah Bet, over 110,000 Jews entered Palestine. By the end of World War II, the Jewish population of Palestine had increased to 33% of the total population. 255. In an effort to win independence, Zionists now waged a guerrilla war against the British. The main underground Jewish militia, the Hagana, formed an alliance called the Jewish Resistance Movement with the Etzel and Stern Gang to fight the British. In June 1946, following instances of Jewish sabotage, such as in the Night of the Bridges, the British launched Operation Agatha, arresting 2,700 Jews, including the leadership of Jewish Agency, whose headquarters were raided. Those arrested were held without trial. On the 4th of July 1946, a massive pogrom in Poland led to a wave of Holocaust survivors fleeing Europe for Palestine. 3 weeks later, Irgun bombed the British military headquarters of the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, killing 91 people. In the days following the bombing, Tel Aviv was placed under curfew and over 120,000 Jews, nearly 20% of the Jewish population of Palestine, were questioned by the police. In the US, Congress criticized British handling of the situation and considered delaying loans that were vital to British post-war recovery. 256. The alliance between Hagana and Etzel was dissolved after the King David bombings. Between 1945 and 1948, 100,000 120,000 Jews left Poland. 257, 258, 259. Their departure was largely organized by Zionist activists in Poland under the umbrella of the semi-clandestine organization Beriha Flight. Beriha was also responsible for the organized emigration of Jews from Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, totaling 250,000, including Poland, Holocaust survivors. 260, 261, 262, 259. The British imprisoned the Jews trying to enter Palestine in the Atlit detainee camp and Cyprus internment camps. Those held were mainly Holocaust survivors, including large numbers of children and orphans. In response to Cypriot fears that the Jews would never leave, since they lacked a state or documentation, and because the 75,000 quota established by the 1939 White Paper had never been filled, the British allowed the refugees to enter Palestine at a rate of 750 per month. 263, 257, 258, 264, 265, 259. By 1947 the Labour government in Britain was ready to refer the Palestine problem to the newly created United Nations. 266, 267, United Nations Partition Plan. United Nations Partition Plan for Palestine, 1947. On the 2nd of April, 1947, the United Kingdom requested that the question of Palestine be handled by the General Assembly. 268. The General Assembly created a committee, United Nations Special Committee on Palestine, UNSCOP, to report on the question of Palestine. 269. In July 1947 the UNSCOP visited Palestine and met with Jewish and Zionist delegations. The Arab Higher Committee boycotted the meetings. During the visit the British Foreign Secretary Ernest Bevin ordered that passengers from an Ali Yobet ship, SS Exodus 1947, to be sent back to Europe. The Holocaust surviving migrants on the ship were forcibly removed by British troops at Hamburg, Germany. 270, 271, 272. The principal non-Zionist Orthodox Jewish, or Haredi, party, or Agudat Israel, recommended to UNSCOP that a Jewish state be set up after reaching a religious status quo agreement with Ben-Gurion regarding the future Jewish state. The agreement granted an exemption from military service to a quota of yeshiva, religious seminary, students and to all Orthodox women, made the Sabbath the national weekend, guaranteed kosher food in government institutions and allowed Orthodox Jews to maintain a separate education system. 273. The majority report of UNSCOP proposed, 274, an independent Arab state, an independent Jewish state, and the city of Jerusalem, the last to be under an international trusteeship system. 275, on 29 November 1947, in Resolution 181-2, the General Assembly adopted the majority report of UNSCOP, but with slight modifications. 276. The plan also called for the British to allow substantial Jewish migration by the 1st of February 1948. 277. Neither Britain nor the UN Security Council took any action to implement the recommendation made by the resolution, and Britain continued detaining Jews attempting to enter Palestine. Concerned that partition would severely damage Anglo-Arab relations, Britain denied UN representatives access to Palestine during the period between the adoption of Resolution 181-2 and the termination of the British Mandate. 278. The British withdrawal was finally completed in May 1948. However, Britain continued to hold, formally illegal, Jewish immigrants of fighting age and their families on Cyprus until March 1949. 279. Civil War. Supply convoy on its way to besiege Jerusalem. April 1948. The General Assembly's vote caused joy in the Jewish community and anger in the Arab community. Violence broke out between the sides, escalating into civil war. From January 1948, operations became increasingly militarized. with intervention of a number of Arab Liberation Army regiments inside Palestine, each active in a variety of distinct sectors around the different coastal towns. They consolidated their presence in Galilee and Samaria. 280. Abd al-Qadir al-Husayni came from Egypt with several hundred men of the army of the Holy War. Having recruited a few thousand volunteers, he organized the blockade of the 100,000 Jewish residents of Jerusalem. 281. The Yishuv tried to supply the city using convoys of up to 100 armored vehicles, but largely failed. By March, almost all Higala's armored vehicles had been destroyed. The blockade was in full operation, and hundreds of Higala members who had tried to bring supplies into the city were killed. 282. Up to 100,000 Arabs, from the urban upper and middle classes in Haifa, Jaffa and Jerusalem, or Jewish-dominated areas, evacuated abroad or to Arab centers eastwards. 283. This situation caused the U.S. to withdraw their support for the partition plan, thus encouraging the Arab League to believe that the Palestinian Arabs, reinforced by the Arab Liberation Army, could put an end to the plan for partition. The British, on the other hand, decided on the 7th of February 1948 to support the annexation of the Arab part of Palestine by Transjordan. 284. The Jordanian army was commanded by British. David Ben-Gurion proclaiming the Israeli Declaration of Independence in 1948. David Ben-Gurion reorganized the Higala and made conscription obligatory. Every Jewish man and woman in the country had to receive military training. Thanks to funds raised by Golda Meir from sympathizers in the United States, and Stalin's decision to support the Zionist cause, the Jewish representatives of Palestine were able to purchase important arms in Eastern Europe. Ben-Gurion gave Ugail Yadin the responsibility to plan for the announced intervention of the Arab states. The result of his analysis was Plan Dalet, in which Higala passed from the defensive to the offensive. The plan sought to establish Jewish territorial continuity by conquering mixed zones. Tiberias, Haifa, Safed, Beis Jaffa and Acre fell, resulting in the flight of more than 250,000 Palestinian Arabs. 285. The situation was one of catalysts for the intervention of neighboring Arab states. On the 14th of May 1948, on the day the last British forces left from Haifa, the Jewish People's Council gathered at the Tel Aviv Museum and proclaimed the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel, to be known as the State of Israel. 286. State of Israel. Arab-Israeli War. Avraham Aden raising the pink flag marking the end of 1948 Arab-Israeli War immediately following the declaration of the new state. Both superpower leaders, U.S. President Harry S. Truman and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, recognized the new state. 287. The Arab League members Egypt, Transjordan, Syria, Lebanon and Iraq refused to accept the UN partition plan and proclaimed the right of self-determination for the Arabs across the whole of Palestine. The Arab states marched their forces into what had, until the previous day, been the British mandate for Palestine, starting the First Arab-Israeli War. After an initial loss of territory by the Jewish state, the tide turned in the Israelis' favor and they pushed the Arab armies back beyond the borders of the proposed Arab state. 288. On the 29th of May 1948, the British initiated United Nations Security Council Resolution 50 declaring an arms embargo on the region. Czechoslovakia violated the resolution, supplying the Jewish state with critical military hardware to mark, mainly British, heavy equipment and planes already owned by the invading Arab states. On the 11th of June, a month-long UN truce was put into effect. 289, 288, following independence, the Higala became the Israel Defense Forces, IDF. The Palmach, Etzel and Lehi were required to cease independent operations and join the IDF. During the ceasefire, Etzel attempted to bring in a privateer's shipment aboard a ship called Al-Talana. When they refused to hand the arms to the government, Ben-Gurion ordered that the ship be sunk. Several Etzel members were killed in the fighting. 290, 291, 292. Large numbers of Jewish immigrants, many of them World War II veterans and Holocaust survivors,